station Circus on KSTAR radio.
It sounds redundant, doesn't it? Education Circus. Sorry. Thank you. Okay. All right, we're going to launch into this thing. I was having an interesting conversation out front when I all of a sudden realized I was supposed to be teaching a class. So you cannot read these handouts in front of you. Don't read them. Not yet. I'm so proud of you. All right, let's launch into a little bit. Some of you were here yesterday when I did the restoration education. Today we're going to talk a little bit about, I think I mentioned yesterday that we have a book series coming out called Providence and Patriots. It's stories from old books, 1800s, even some 1700s, early 1900s. Patriotic events, providential events that have happened in American history. And so some of the stories that you have are those stories there, so you can take a look at them. We'll talk about them in just a minute. But we want to take a look first at why. What is the state of education now? What's going on? Why are you homeschooling? I think you all have different reasons, but I want to show you some of the things that are happening that kind of caused us to decide to do what we were doing. What we are doing. 2010 graduating high school seniors. 5 years ago. Okay. Survey that they did, this is a major survey where they surveyed 10,000 graduating high school seniors now, 5 years ago. More students thought U.S. Grant rather than George Washington led the troops at Valley Forge. Now you can go ahead and compare your students to this and see how well they're doing, okay? 1/3 of these graduating seniors thought the Magna Carta document Magna Carta was a document the Pilgrims signed on the Mayflower. They only missed it by 400 years, okay? 1/2 failed to recognize Patrick Henry as the man who said, "Give me liberty or give me death." There are times when I put the parents through this little survey, but it's sometimes, for you it wouldn't be, but sometimes it's a little embarrassing for some parents because some of them don't know either. 40% thought the Constitution Convention of 1787 produced the Emancipation Proclamation. It wasn't. No, this is the look I love to see on your faces. Like every once in a while, it's like, what? All right, next. 51% could not name the 3 branches of the federal government. So I would put you on the spot here and ask you to name the 3 branches of the federal government. Do you know the 3 branches of the federal government?
So it's legislative, judicial, and...
Just make an executive decision. You got it. Way to go. Okay. You got it. Okay. All right. And this is the one that really gets me. Less than 15% can name the 5 freedoms protected by the First Amendment. I'm not going to ask you that one, okay? But that's okay. That's okay. All right. You get the idea. 33% of students believe that the Constitution goes too far. Now this is what our children are walking into. We're already there. We know that. This is what they're walking into, and it's not going to get better. I can guarantee you that. We know that. There's never been a time when it's gotten to this point that it's gotten better. Do we wonder why we have this ridiculous thing called separation of church and state? Can anybody, aside from Jeff, can anybody tell me where that is found in the U.S. Constitution? You can't say that. Where's your daughter? It's the mother of one of our students. It's not there. At least not that statement. Okay, next. Thomas Jefferson. This is one of my favorite statements at all. It's on the wall in the classroom where I teach. If a nation expects to be ignorant and free, it expects what never was and never will be, leaving out the middle part of that. Okay, so how did they fix the problem? Want to guess how the government fixed the problem? Here's the 2010 history standards that the U.S. government came up with after seeing the problems that were created that we just saw. 2nd grade. No required historical figures are to be taught. Most of this is there are different versions of, well, not different versions, but there are different standards in Common Core. These are some of them. Second, Nathan Hale and Clara Barton were removed due to age-appropriate materials. What would be age inappropriate for 3rd grade about Nathan Hale? Well, that he was hung. So you can't teach it. It's too disturbing. It's too upsetting to 3rd graders to read it. Clara Barton, I'm not quite sure what it was. Never been able to find out what was not appropriate at that age. 8th grade is when you get the very first mention, should be, of the Founding Fathers. So what is 8th grade? 13 years old, 14 years old? That's the very first time that you hear the Founding Fathers mentioned. 5th grade, they take out these men here. Now, some of them may not bother you. Philo Farnsworth may not bother you, but there's a reason reason why it should. Benjamin Rush, I hope you know who he was. 8th grade, they eliminate the study of the reasons for the creation of the Bill of Rights and the study of the importance of the 9th and 10th Amendments. Why would you leave out the study of the 9th and 10th Amendments? Well, of course you don't want people to know that it's not the federal government that has all the rights. 10th grade. This is what they do include, which is okay, but not at the exclusion of others. Explain the significance of the religious holidays and observances such as Easter, Ramadan, Yom Kippur, Diwali, and various contemporary societies. So you do have to explain this. Anything important about the dates that are coming up? Because the dates that are coming up are not dates that your children will learn. These dates are excluded. 1607, 1776, and 1787. Most of us probably don't know what those dates are. I think something happened in 1787. Not quite sure what it was. But it was pretty close to 76, so it must be important. Okay? Here's hope. Okay, following are just a couple of questions that they have now replaced the study of the things that they've eliminated with. I'll ask you to explain this one. This is one of the questions you will be required to answer. Yeah, right now. Define a multicultural society and consider both the positive and negative qualities of multiculturalism. Go. No, don't. Because if you can, you're in the wrong place, okay? Next one. Analyze the experiences and evaluate the contributions of diverse groups in multicultural societies. These are the questions that they've replaced the study of the Founding Fathers with. So, why did we decide to write this book? A couple of reasons. If you read any book that's written basically after 1925, especially the 1930s, you'll find that so many religious and providential stories are taken out. They're just not there anymore. You can get patriotic from time to time, but if it includes religion, you can't get it. So, Elder Featherstone made this comment. And the next 3 screens are my 3 favorite screens of all time. Our concern is, if you don't know who Von J. Featherstone was, then ask your mom or dad, or maybe your grandparents. Our concern isn't about the flames of freedom which burn in our generation. The concern is that in the upcoming generation, the fire has never been kindled. President McKay said this: into the soul of every student, I would have instilled the patriotic fervor of the Patrick Henry. What does that mean? When David O. McKay said, I would have instilled the patriotic fervor of a Patrick Henry, what does that mean to you? Let's see what Patrick Henry said. And if your child has this kind of a burning, this kind of a fire, this kind of a fervor inside their soul, they're ready to meet the challenges. They know where they stand. There will be no question when they stand as those young stripling warriors did before the challenge that faced them. They will do the same as those 2060 did. They will turn and they will fight. They will not run. But you've got to have this kind of a fire. Patrick Henry said, were my soul trembling on the wing of eternity, were this hand freezing to death, and my voice choking with the last stroke, I would still, with the last gasp of that voice, implore you to remember the truth. God has given America to be free. If your child knows this, and they can feel it here, the way that you feel it, then you're okay. Then they will not turn, then they will not run. Matter of fact, there are 2 types of people in this emergency: those that run from, and those that run to. Your child will turn and run to. That's what you're looking for in your children. That's why these stories. So let's take a look at these stories now. Pick up the first, if you would. Battle of Princeton. We're just going to go through them kind of quickly. I'm not going to go through it line by line because my glasses are clogged. There. Okay. What we've done in some of these things is we've talked a little bit, we give you a little bit of a lead in on these stories, and then we give you the story itself. If you look at the story itself, the part that's in black is our commentary. The part that is not actually comes from the textbooks, the old ones. And if you go clear back to the back of the second page, it says the Battle of Princeton back here. That's the actual story itself. Okay? Well, let's just talk about this for a second. You'll be able to read it yourself. Here's the story, okay? Washington had just fought the Battle of Trenton. He gets backed up, long story short, I'm not going to give you a whole history, he gets backed up against the river. He can't get away. In are coming the British. They've got him trapped, again. Let's face it, Washington was having to learn at the very beginning how to fight battles. He'd been through the French and Indian War, but not as a general, not as a commanding officer for the most part. They've got him trapped. What does he do? The problem is also that the ground is really, really soft. And there's 18 inches of mud on the ground. And he can't get what is most valuable to him out from the onslaught that's coming the very next day of the British. He can't move his cannon. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many oxen he hooks up. You've got 18 inches of mud, you can't move it. So Washington calls a war council, calls together his brightest and best officers to help him decide what they should do. Do they run? Do they get the men and go around the outside of the British? Do they take them on head on? Do they try to get across the river? What do? They hold a short prayer, and you'll find all this in here. While they're in the middle of the prayer, the wind turns suddenly from south to north. And during the next 30 minutes, this is how cold it was, and I know that you guys know what a norther is, but this is a blue norther. It freezes the ground solid. You'll find it. It freezes the ground solid. What are they able to do? They're then able to hitch the oxen and horses up to the cannon and pull them out of the way of the British. They take them around the outside this way. Washington, however, sends some of his men around this way. So they've gotten their cannon, they've gotten their heavy armaments out of the way. Now, he sends some of his men to Princeton. They're going to try to capture the arms there. So they've gotten the heavy weaponry and the cannon out of the way. They're partway to Princeton. And all of a sudden, as the Americans are going that way, as they've gone around the outside, they think that they've eluded the British. They look to their left, and not 150 yards over are the British going that way to try to catch them. They see each other at the same time. There's a rush to this hill. Both the British and the Americans are running to this hill as fast as they can go, trying to get the high ground. The Americans get there first. The British aren't stupid. They go around to this side, and that's where they face each other. They've got a little bit of high ground. The Americans are on higher ground. The British then advance. The Americans, because they're led, and I'm not going to get into who it was and everything, you can read it there. The Americans see the advance of the British. The British have their cannon with them. The British have about 1,000 men. The Americans have about 500. The British advance, advance, advance. The Americans turn and run. Their general turns and runs. Washington at this point is coming around the outside. He hears the commotion, and he watches as the men are running by him. And this is something that really upsets some people. He takes out his horsewhip. Anything he can do to turn the men around. If he has to horsewhip somebody, he horsewhips somebody. He turns the men around and gets them faced up. The general now is still running. They pretty much guess he's run for 2 days before he finally stops. Washington moves his men forward. The British are coming this way. And Washington was not one of those generals that led from the back. He led from the front, which is what the British did not do. Charges through right through the middle of the American lines, and he's sitting down right between the British lines and the American lines. 30 yards that way are the British. 30 yards that way are the Americans. At that point, the British, all 1,000 of them, raise their rifles, their muskets. They know who he is. Who are they going to shoot at? They're going to shoot at Washington. He's on his white horse. He's got a fancier hat on than most have. Everybody in the world knows who he is. They raise and they fire. Washington's aide-de-camp was by him. He ran to him, trying to pull his horse back to the lines and get him out from in between the two sides. He's pulling at the horse. Washington won't go. Washington horsewhips him to get him to let go of his horse because he's not leaving. His aide-de-camp, knowing that this is the end, drops to his knees. He doesn't want to get shot. And the British fire. The smoke is so heavy, you can't see for 15, 20 seconds what's happened. The aide-de-camp cries out, he is dead. Smoke clears. Now, here's the accidental. We sure got lucky. Here's the accidental. Because it never could have been planned by God. I mean, he's not in history, so we can't have him. So we better figure out how lucky we got. The British fired from 30 yards away. Now you figure that this room here is probably, what, 30 feet across, more or less? 25, 30 feet. So figure about 3 or 4 of these across. That's how far away. All 1,000 of them fired, all at Washington. They wanted to get him. There was a bounty on his head. And they all missed. Every single one of them. He got really, really lucky. We know God couldn't have done it. Washington's then, his aide-de-camp stands up and says, "Thank God His Excellency is safe," and waves his hat in the air. Washington then, the British see this, they know they're in trouble. You can't kill this guy. He takes off after him, yelling along the way, "It's a fine day for a fox hunt." You'll see that in there. Why did he yell that? Because one of the British generals, when they had the Americans caught, said at one point, "It's going to be a fine day for a fox hunt," because they went after Washington. This is a little stab back at him. He was so lucky he didn't get killed that day. It could have been God. It had to have been chance, because there's no way that God would have intervened to do that, right? Because anyone had to take sides. How did that happen? Why did it happen? The same way it happened in another story. And which one do you have in front of you there? You have, which one is it? Little Round Top, did Little Round Top yesterday. You can leave Little Round Top, read Little Round Top for yourself, okay? It's another one that's incredibly cool. Take this one. How many of you, anybody here from Texas? Anybody from Texas? Oh, I'm so sorry. You've got, what famous battle do you know of that happened? What's your name? What famous battle happened in Texas?
The Battle of Alamo.
Thank you. You know that. You get an A star on your today. Okay? Battle of the Alamo. Battle of the Alamo, you know, I've never understood that one. Has anybody ever been to the Alamo before? Never understood. You have? Never. If you've ever been there, and I've been there a number of times, I've stood on that wall and I've looked out. There's a ramp that you used to be able to go up onto that you can look out. Now it's a shopping mall over there. It used to be just open area where the 4,000 to 6,000 Mexicans were camped that night. And I've often wondered as those young men stood up on that walkway and looked out over the 4,000 to 6,000 Mexicans. We don't know exactly how many they were. I wonder what they were thinking. I wonder why it was that they decided to stay. So I talked to my class about it. There was no where you might die tomorrow. There was no maybe. They knew they were going to die. There had already been the banner put up by the Mexican army that it was surrender or die. And they'd chosen not to surrender. But there they stayed. And there they died. And we've all heard about that story. And the bravery of those men that were there. When you walk inside of the Alamo, you're asked to take your hat off. You're asked to talk in a whisper. And I've said before a number of times that I've never been anywhere except for a religious building where I felt a reverence like I felt there at the Alamo for the sacrifice. And that is the battle we all hear about, but we don't hear about what happened 6 weeks later, within 6 weeks later. After the Battle of the Alamo, Sam Houston, who was not at the Battle of the Alamo, most people put him there, was trying to put an army together. Santa Anna is going after him. Sam Houston runs. At least that's what everybody thinks he's doing. He's on the run. For 6 weeks with 700 men, followed by 2,100 Mexicans, Sam Houston is on the run, trying to stay just a step ahead of him. His men are on the point where they're about ready to turn on him. Matter of fact, a lot of them have turned on him. After 6 weeks, Sam Houston finally camps on a little peninsula. It's called the San Jacinto Peninsula. And that's where he decides he's going to take on the Mexican army. 700 Texians here, 2,100 Mexicans here. The man that was leading the Mexican was a man by the name of Santa Anna, who was considered to be the Napoleon of the West. He was that brilliant. He was good. He was smart. But Santa Anna decides to do something you should never, ever, ever do with your military commander. He didn't leave himself a means of escape. He camps on a peninsula. What does a peninsula have on 3 sides? Water. There he camps. Why Santa Anna decided to camp there? Who knows? The next morning, as he walks out, Sam Houston looks across about a 300-yard space. He sees Santa Anna there. He knows this is the day. He lines up his 700 men, and they charge. The Mexicans see them coming. They fire the cannon. Here's the Texians, as they were called. charging in one long line. The Mexicans raise their muskets, just like the British did with Washington, and they all fire. Now, what are the odds? 2,100 Mexicans firing from, at this point, about 100, 150 yards. And they all fire. You know what happened? Every single one of them missed. Every single one of the Mexicans fired high, except one. And that's the one that hit Sam Houston's horse and killed his horse. Rotten thing to do. And it put Sam Houston down, but he got up on another horse and he charged. The battle itself lasted 18 minutes, which is exactly as long as the Battle of the Alamo lasted. Now, why is this battle so providential? Why is it so important? A number of reasons. Number one, Sam Houston's army had one battle in them, and Houston knew it. They couldn't fight two battles. They were in worse shape than Washington's army was in the American Revolution. They had one battle. If they won this battle, they win independence for Texas. If they lose this battle, it's over. Mexico keeps Texas. That, number one, is what had to happen in order to at least have a chance. The second thing that had to happen, they had to capture Santa Anna. Why Santa Anna? He was the emperor of Mexico. The only one that could sign the document that said, which is what they wanted, that said he would cede Texas to the Texans was Santa Anna. If he got away or if he died, they would just send somebody else. The battle would go on. 18 minutes is what the battle took. The Texans defeated the Mexicans. A lot of things going on there we won't go into right now. But then they had to look for Santa Anna. Had they killed him? Had they escaped? He had escaped. They spent the next day and a half looking for him. And they found him. They brought him back. And Sam Houston, who had had his horse shot from underneath him, but who had been hit in the ankles, laying there beneath an old oak tree, on the verge of death. Everybody wanted to kill Santa Anna. Everybody. They hated him because of the Alamo. But Houston said no. And he made Santa Anna sign the document, signed over Texas to the Texans. What does that matter to us? If you're LDS, you might want to think about it just a little bit. There's a little place that when you look up from Texas, and there's no place up from Texas, but if you look up the map from Texas, you see a little place called Utah. And that little place called Utah was kind of where some saints and Mormons ended up going a couple of years later. You gotta remember this battle happened in 1836. When did the Mormons end up going to Utah? 1847. So 11 years. What if Utah had not been there? What if Spain had still controlled that one little sliver of Utah since it's been moved any further west? What would have happened? Where would the church have gone? It's like the question I asked yesterday. Would we have gone back to Missouri? I don't think so. Would we have gone back to New York? No, probably not. Not a good thing. You want to go south to Mexico? Well, you're already in Mexico. You want to go north into Canada? You can't go there either. Where do you go? That's the point of us telling these stories, is we want our young men and our young women to understand that it's not by chance, it's not by accident, it's not a bunch of fruitcakes that went out there, launched themselves out. Did it make any sense for Sam Houston to take on the Mexican army in Santa Anna? Absolutely not. He's outnumbered more than 3-1. But we want our young men and our young women to understand two things. Number one, that the people that fought these battles were incredibly brave. They took chances that other people did not take, but they didn't do it alone. So, here's the question. Pick a historical event. Is there a story that goes with it? Is there a providential event that goes with it? We teach our children all the time that they must respect the patriotism. They must learn about the founding fathers. But when we teach them, how do we teach them? Do we teach them that it was luck? Do we teach them that it was chance? Do we teach them that it was just fortunate that they did what they did? Or do we recognize God's hand in these things? Let me give you one. I'm not going to ask Jeff, but I'll ask you. What was the movie he's going to purchase?
We bought a lot of land from Napoleon.
Okay. Did Napoleon want to give up that land? Was Napoleon the kind of guy that gave away land cheap? How did he get it? a question for you too, that you always ask. And the stories you'll read will have it in there. What if we'd not gotten that territory? What is on the very eastern border of the Louisiana Purchase? It's called the Mississippi River. If we don't get that land, what happens? That was in 1803. What happens 40 years later? The Mormon settlers get to the Mississippi River, and then where did they go? You can look at it, like I said, you can look at these things as chances for you. You can look at these chances as accident, at these things as accident, but they're not. You've all heard the story of the bulletproof George Washington. You know that one, don't you? You've heard the bulletproof George Washington, right?
No, I have not.
Okay. Okay. How many have heard of that story, the bulletproof Washington? You've heard of that one, okay? What happened there? Washington's on his way to Pittsburgh, as we know it. It's called the Battle of Monongahela. You've got Braddock, who was the British arrogant general who's leading the way. You've got Washington with some of his Virginia militia. What providential happened there? See, that's the problem. We know about the patriotic things. We know that Washington was one of 63 British and American officers. He was the only one basically left standing. We know of the bravery, we know of the heroics, we know of the patriotism, but what do we know about the providential? There's some incredibly providential things that happen. We don't know them. If we don't know them, how do we teach them? And if we don't teach them, then I'll ask you the very same thing I asked the parents yesterday. And you tell me, we're almost out of time, you tell me, what was it the stripling mothers taught their sons and their daughters, in this case their sons, that caused them not to turn and run at the battle that we all read about, or the battles that we all read about in the Book of Mormon? What was it? Why did they not turn? Had they been in battle before, these sons? Not been in battle before. Had they watched their fathers train and fight? They'd not watched it, because their fathers had made a covenant that they would not. Were they experiencing anything besides what their fathers and their mothers let them do? No. These mothers and fathers have made promises. So they're out in battle, they're being chased by the largest Lamanite army in the world, which probably, most likely at that time, was the largest army in the world, and they're on the run. Their leader gives them an opportunity at one point to do what? He stops, they stay overnight. What do they give them the option to do the next day? Turn and run, or continue to fight. Or turn and fight, or continue to run. What do? Turn and fight. Why? Why do they turn and fight? Why do they not keep on running? They have no experience. They've never seen their fathers fight. They're in a situation where it's the very first time they've ever been in this situation. You've got a whole bunch of guys chasing you with spears and arrows. It's not exactly the safest situation in the world. You're outnumbered. You're outmanned. You're outgunned. But yet 2,060 of these young men turned and they fought. Why? Yes?
Because they thought more on the liberty of their fathers than we did on their lives.
And why? You're exactly right.
Their mothers taught.
And thank you for getting emotional about that. Why? Because their mothers had taught them. And this is the question I would ask you. What was it and how was it that those mothers taught?
Individual stories.
They taught them in the same way. It wasn't just information that entered the head. This was information that touched the heart. Those mothers taught those sons so that when the time came that they had to make that ultimate decision to change the course of history, where they stood up for what they believed in, or they turned and they ran. There was no question. Because these young men did not just fight. In the midst of the whole battle that's going on, with the death around them, the blood, the gore, the arrows, the spears, anything you want to imagine, the way that those mothers had taught them caused those men not just to those boys, not just to fight, but to obey with exactness. I know we can't even imagine what it was like. But they stayed, they fought, and they obeyed with exactness. Here's the question, and I know I'm putting these two young people on the spot, but imagine your own children. the time comes, when your children are asked, and there will come a time. If you don't think so, yes, you will. If you don't think that there will come a time when your sons and your daughters are going to have to turn and stand up for what they believe in, then look at what their contemporaries are learning or not learning. If you honestly believe, as you watch what's happening in our country, and Jeff can tell you probably better than anybody, what's happening to our laws, what's happening to the original Constitution we have, as you look at these numbers here, and you look at what's going to happen not just to your sons and your daughters, but to your grandchildren, then if you're not worried about that, then take a look at this. What are the ramifications of this? 33% of high school students believe the Constitution goes too far in the rights it protects. So which rights would you give up? Which rights would you have your children give up if they're going to go along with this? Let's just take the First Amendment. Is it speech? Is it press? Is it assembly? Is it a religion? Is it petition? Which right would you have them give up? Which right do you want your children to say, that's it? I'll give up that one. I'll give up press. I'll give up speech. I'll give up religion. I'll give up assembly. Most of the kids that I ask say, I'll give up petition because they don't know what it is, not understanding. That's your right to go to the government and say no. Which one do you want your children to give? Which one are you willing to watch from the sidelines or from the other side as your children are forced to give it up? Because this is where we're going. This is why the children must be taught not just that they were patriotic men and women, but that God had a hand in changing the course of history. What happened at the Battle of San Jacinto? 700 against 2,100? Are you serious? And all the Mexicans fired high? Really? Was it one giant Mexican hiccup? That just, boom. Okay? How was it they happened? Just got so lucky that they found Santa Ana so we could sign over Texas? And the Battle of Princeton. They're 90 feet away. 30 yards. And 1,000 British miss him. And I realize it was the British. We're talking about people that run through the forest in war wearing red. Shoot me, okay? And if you ever notice, watch the British uniforms, they even had a white X right here. Shoot me here, okay? It's like, really? And when you look at those things, you say, that it wasn't luck, it wasn't accident. God had a hand in it. Why do your kids need to know that? Because of this. So now maybe as you look at it, then you understand a little bit why you must teach your children, not with just about patriotism, but with heart. So that when the time comes that your child has to stand up, and if you want to see a really good talk on this, listen to Elder Oaks, when he talks about the role of religion in government, and he talks about religious freedoms. Are your children going to be able to do what those stripling warriors youth did when the time comes? Because I've got news for you. When the battle is on you, it's too late to prepare. It's like the talk that was given by one of the general authorities. When the rain starts to fall, it's too late to start building the ark. Now is the time when you have to prepare your children. The ramifications of this, we've already seen in part. And as bad as it is now, I remember, and I've told my classes before, I remember my third grade class, Mrs. Hamby in Warden, Washington. Up behind her head, right up there, was a picture of Christ in the middle, Washington on one side, and Lincoln on the other side. I agree with two of them, Lincoln. But I remember the day when she was told to take those 3 pictures down. Mrs. Hamby wasn't LDS, she was just a good Christian woman. She refused to do it. She refused to do it for 3 weeks. Little small town, farming town. Finally, the school superintendent, not the principal, he wouldn't do it, had to come in and take them down. And I will never forget sitting in that class as Mrs. Hamby, I guess wept is the only word, because it meant so much to her to have those those pictures up above her as she taught her class. If you tried to do that now, if you tried to put those pictures up, if you tried to tell the stories that we just told you, and give credit where credit is due, or even suggest that there was some providential intervention, you would not be allowed to do it. And now, we're at 86%. This is the quotation now that I gave, and I hope you understand. If our nation, it doesn't say stupid, even though we've got there, I think we've gone by it, and we've gotten stupid at times. But if a nation expects to be divinity free, and the ... is in a state of civilization, it expects what never was and never will be. Jefferson was one of the greatest historians that our country will ever have. He knew, he had studied all the great civilizations. He knew you cannot be ignorant of what your foundation really is and remain free. And we are saying it now. You can say it's accidental if you choose. It's not. And this is how we fix the problem? Really? And this, well, these are the questions we ask them. Let me just finish with this. I admire you. Not that it means anything. Most of you don't know me. More than you know, for your willingness to take hold of your children's education. The first thing that you must do is get the passion within yourself. I told my students for years, I wish I could take the burning that's here and put it in life. You can't. You have to learn these stories. You have to see them. You have to then tell them to your children in a way that it will touch them not here, but here. They have to learn names and dates and places. When you're talking about Washington and Jefferson and Sam Houston and one of these great Americans along the way, the burning that you have in here, you have to be able to relate to your children. If not, continue to go with this. We will continue to see the things that we've seen. The things that I've seen in my, 60 plus years. The story of Mrs. Handy was just one. Project ahead. I was 10 years old at the time. It's been 52 years since I saw that. Project 52 years ahead. And if you see even those number of changes take place in the next 52 years, which shall be many, many more, what will the condition of our country be? That is why I appreciate your passion. I really do. And your emotion. Because when the time comes that our children have to turn and fight, it's too late to prepare them for the fight. And they have to be ready to obey the examples. My prayer is that you will have the insight and the courage to teach your children with heart and passion and feel it, and that you will use the stories that you find and you can find, not just to inform them, but to prepare them. If you want to just inform them, turn on the computer, let them read it. Prepare them for the path. They are not here by chance. I hope you know that. And I look, whenever I teach the students, I teach every day. I tell them this almost every day. So I'll tell you. You are not here by chance. This is not an accident you're here right now. You are not here just because at this time. You are here for a specific reason. You were saved for right now. And moms and dads, that's your challenge. You have the next generation of warriors. The battle that they fight is of greater importance than the battle that they arisen in 2065. Prayers that you will prepare them. Teach them so that they feel it here. And when the time comes, they will be able to present this. Yeah, the book will be out in about 4 months, so don't.
If you guys could fill out your surveys and pass them this way, that would be great.